By the 1960s, the global population was growing faster than ever.
More than 11,000 scientists signed a petition calling for population control.
The population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it.
Too many people living on too little land with too little resources.
Human beings were something approximating a cancer on the planet.
I don't think it's able to sustain the 5 billion in the long run.
It very well may go to 10 billion.
Fears about overpopulation created a lot of panic and misinformation. But this isn't really how things are. Welcome to Alux. To better understand this, we need to look at something called demographic transition. So this process isn't something that was well understood until a few decades ago. In 1989, 2 British academics published a paper with some of the best research we have on the topic, helping to paint a different picture than the one forecast by the UN. Since Britain was the first to have an industrial revolution, it was the first region to go through a demographic transition, which occurs in 5 stages. Stage 1 is where you have a high birth rate, but also a high death rate. Population growth remains slow because death and birth rates are matched. This stage is known to be pre-modern. Practically every region has moved past this one. Stage 2 is where advancements in tech and medicine allow the mortality rate to drop, but birth rates remain high, leading to a population boom. Some developing nations are in this stage right now, like Pakistan and Bangladesh. Stage 3 is reached when, thanks to better education and a raised status of women, fewer children are being born, death rates are low, and the population begins to level off. Most developing countries are currently transitioning from Stage 2 to 3. Stage 4 is where many developed countries are now. This is when both birth and death rates decline, leading to a stable population either growing or shrinking slowly. And finally, Stage 5 is reached when a region has become highly industrialized. Everyone has access to quality education, spurring even more technological development. Birth and death rates are also fairly well matched, resulting in no population growth. Many regions of Western Europe and North America have reached this stage, as have places like Australia, Japan, and Singapore. Let's go back to this graphic. As the regions advance through these stages, population growth slows down. This still leaves us with around 11 billion people by 2100. So the next following question is obvious. Is 11 billion still too many for us to survive? Not at all. The issues we're facing are not a result of population size. The problems we have are unequal distribution of resources, climate change, and limited access to information and education. These problems are what keep living conditions poor in transitioning countries. People in developing nations often need to have 4 or more children. They become a sort of economic asset in a way, because these kids can grow up to take care of the family. And it's one thing to want 5 kids and another thing to need 5 kids, just in case 3 of them don't make it past 20. It's been proven through countless studies that access to quality education, especially among women and girls, leads to fewer births in a region. On top of that, the more educated a population becomes, the more advancements can be made in all areas of society. Greater advancements means a better quality of life, so it's no longer necessary to have 6 kids. Families instead begin to focus on making a good life for 1 to 2 children on average. As a population becomes more educated, they also become wealthier. Wealthier populations tend to see low birth rates, low death rates, and more stable numbers. All of this just means more minds can focus on tackling the big stuff than ever before, and that's an incredible thing. Now let's talk land. One of the major issues facing highly populated and transitioning countries right now is the lack of available land. India, for example, is between stage 2 and 3 of its transition, with a current population of 1.39 billion people. In the 70s, they had a population density of 191 people per square kilometer. Now it's more like 464 people per square kilometer. To contrast that, consider a nation like Canada. It's the second largest country in the world, sitting comfortably in the late stages of its transition, and only has a population of about 38 million people. It sounds almost laughable, but the population density of the entire country is roughly 4 people per square kilometer. In the 70s, it was only 2. Most Canadians are concentrated in major city centers along the border shared with the US. For example, Vancouver has more than 5,000 people per square K, Toronto more than 4,000, but there's so much open space everywhere else. Now, to be fair, much of this space is rugged and in some cases downright harsh to live in, especially since a lot of the land is completely uninhabited by people, as in there isn't even a town close by. And Canada isn't alone here. Many countries have open land and concentrated city populations, but that's been changing. One of the major shifts the COVID-19 pandemic ushered in en masse was remote working. We've entered the age where if jobs aren't being automated, they're becoming remote. Of course, there are some exceptions to this, but more companies than ever have made the switch. Globally, about 16% of companies claim to operate fully remote, and 62% of working adults say they do their jobs from home at least some of the time. In the future, most of the world's processes will be decentralized, so this shift makes sense. However, a major hurdle to overcome is getting reliable access to energy and the internet in places hard to reach by conventional wireless and fiber methods. But remember those transitional stages? The later ones allow for some pretty spectacular tech advancements that help to solve the bigger issues we face as global citizens. 2 advancements poised to take care of the energy internet problem are things like SpaceX's Starlink program, which aims to bring internet access to places it's never reached before, and Tesla's Powerwall, which is a large lithium-ion battery designed to store solar energy for the average home. Through advancements like these, paired with forces like the pandemic and deurbanization, regions that are sparse will begin to fill out, easing the strain that we see now. So, if population isn't the problem, what is? The problem lies in how we do stuff. The way forward is through investing in more sustainable options and processes for everything. Tackling climate change should be a higher priority than trying to decrease the global population. That will stabilize on its own as more countries go through the demographic transition. So, responsibly helping those nations transition faster helps us all. That's why it's important to support trustworthy programs aimed at improving education and quality of life in these nations, because helping them prosper helps the global community as a whole. Raising all regions to stages 4 and 5 means an unprecedented number of people will have the skills and education to live well, create solutions for our biggest problems, and push the world forward.